Boruto and Kawaki are secretly enhanced by the Shibai cells, and this could be their game changer when it comes to defeating Jura. We might soon be getting the awakening of a really powerful Shinjutsu, such as the Jogen from Boruto's side, and it all makes too much sense. Back during the Boro fight, Mitsuki used his snake to amp up the whole Team 7 with antibodies made from Boro's blood. Later it was revealed in the story that every Kara cyborg was modified with the cells of Shibai or Suzuki, but only a few of them awakened his Shinjutsu. So this technically means that just because Mitsuki has used his snake to create antibodies from Boro's blood, there's a chance that the divine cells would have transferred to his teammates as well. Maybe that's the real reason behind why Sarada's Orihime is the strongest Mangekyou power ever. It could literally have the essence of a Shinjutsu, which explains how it's so broken. I will talk about the special power and role of Boruto in a while, but when it comes to Kawaki, the lore goes much deeper than the blood of Boro. Kawaki was the key subject, or let's say the most vital puzzle piece of Amaru. When he was given his karma back, Amaru used the example of a door and a house to explain how it was possible. Think of Kawaki as a house, with the karma seal acting as the door, and Ishiki's soul was the rightful owner of that house. But once the door, which is the karma, was removed after Ishiki's death, the owner lost the entire access, meaning he could no longer re-enter. The door was gone, but the house still held everything that the owner once installed, and that's when Amaru introduced a new door, which was the artificial karma, so that Kawaki himself could take advantage of Ishiki's powers. Simple, right? But here is how it gets interesting. Kawaki doesn't hold the Kokugan in the same eye as Shibai, and while the reason may seem like the placement of the karma, but it could actually be something more than that, as there is another character who possesses the Kokugan in the same eye as Kawaki, and that is Shibai. So the theory goes like this: Amaru could have used the Shibai cells to construct the artificial karma of Kawaki, and the reason it could actually be possible is because all the feats of Ishiki originated from the Kokugan, which means Shibai could perform the exact same techniques as him, meaning there is no way for us to tell whether Kawaki's powers come from Shibai or Ishiki. Now the other discovery that I made could solidify this theory even more. How do you think Amaru created the artificial karma of Kawaki if it wasn't through the Shibai cells? He likely doesn't have the remains of any other Otsutsuki, and there is no way he could create such a strong Otsutsuki weapon by scratch. Just like how the Shibai cells were able to provide different Shinjutsu to different cyborgs, what needs to be noted is that the karma in itself is a Shinjutsu as well, and it's not like Momoshiki's karma is different than Ishiki's. They all work fundamentally the same way. It's just that when it belongs to a different Otsutsuki, the vessel would manifest different abilities. Now when it comes to Kawaki and his special karma, which is made from the cells of Shibai, it could be that he would be able to unlock some Shinjutsu that was actually possessed by Shibai or Suzuki, and looking at how he wanted to be upgraded with powers beyond the karma, even if it means getting scientific upgrades, this kinda only signifies one thing: Amaru already knew Kawaki would crave more powers, similar to the time when he was well aware of how the loss of karma will affect him psychologically. So just because his present bioweapon has been made from the cells of Shibai, he could be scaling way above Ishiki, which is actually necessary, since the introduction of Jura had already set a massive bar for the duo to surpass. It all makes more sense when you look at this representation of Shibai or Suzuki, with one side of his face depicting Boruto with the Jogen, while the other being a representation of Kawaki with the Kokugan. The story is trying to build a narrative for both the karma wielders to eventually unlock the powers of the divine beings, which are the gods of the Otsutsuki. So even though Kawaki was also amped by Boro's DNA, it did not act as a trigger to his divine Shinjutsu, cause Amaru never let his true potential out. Also when it comes to Boruto, it's a small detail but his name sounds similar to Boro, which may be intentional on the author's part, as he received his own share of the Shibai cells from him. Not to mention the mediator in this case was Mitsuki, who looks familiar to Tonevi in his chakra mode, and looking at how the moon of Suzuki was responsible for the Jogen's premature awakening in the anime, it may be a parallel for Boruto's true divine awakening in the manga. Also, Mitsuki's name translates to Snake Moon, and he calls Boruto his son, which yet again amplifies this possibility. So now that we know both the karma users could be using the Shibai cells, how would it make any difference in their battle against the big bad, which is Jura? Cause if you think about it, even Code was modified with the Shibai cells, which gave him the Shinjutsu of the claw marks, but he's still weak compared to Jura, which means possessing these cells means nothing until you actually know how to use the techniques. However, even with some great battle IQ, it's more or less not possible to defeat a human humanoid manifestation of the Ten Tails. Well, this is where I believe a mind-boggling plot point comes into play. If Boruto and Kawaki are really using the powers of a god of Suzuki, then there is a narrative in making that I believe could change everything in the story. If you think about it, Jura was only able to emerge due to the mutation of Shibai's DNA, which affected the juvenile Ten Tails. If by chance the Shinjutsu belonged to some other Otsutsuki who wasn't a god, there is no way the Ten Tails would have evolved like this. Now here is something interesting. As you know, the signature ability of Code are the claw marks, which work as a teleportation jutsu. He uses them to instantly travel between marked locations, even across different dimensions. In chapter 72, Code used his claw marks to fragment Kara's juvenile Ten Tails into smaller humanoid entities called the claw grimes. He achieved this by wrapping the Ten Tails in claw marks, which interacted with his chakra-based body. That was similar to molding clay to create these creatures. The Ten Tails remains after the fragmentation eventually became Jura, the direct incarnation of the Ten Tails itself, unlike the other Shinju that mimic individuals devoured by the claw grime. Now, as we know, Code's claw marks are a Shinjutsu awakened through the Shibai cells that Amado had implanted. These cells enhanced his power and enabled the claw marks to interact with the Ten Tails on a biological and chakra level. We can see Boruto speculating in chapter 6 that the evolution of the claw grime into sentient human god trees, including Jura, may be linked to Code's white Kama, which contains the essence of Ishiki, if we go by what was revealed. But I believe that is the DNA of Shibai from the claw marks, which actually played a role in triggering the Ten Tails evolution into sentient beings. And it was for a reason that the Shinju himself refers to as divine intervention. Remember how Boruto has cheated death many times just to keep on living and prevent the timeline from collapsing. The reason he didn't die at points where he was supposed to is only because a higher power, which is likely Shibai or Suzuki, protected him for a greater cause. Now when we look back at the evolution of the Ten Tails, the claw marks penetrated the creature and planted a divine spark deep inside, a faint whisper of Shibai's will. It seems to have resonated with the creature's raw and untamed chakra, which led to the Ten Tails, who was once a mindless and instinct-driven mass, to evolve and change its form. The shift affected more than just its body, as it reached the metaphysical fabric of its being. Out of the shattered form of the beast, something new began to rise. Jura was born, who was not a monstrous entity, but also a thinking force with purpose and identity. The transformation unfolded quietly, yet its impact was profound. The mindless roars of the Ten Tails were replaced by a voice of calm insight. Jura spoke with curiosity sharpened by intellect, a mind that rivaled the greatest thinkers of the human world. His appearance echoed Ishiki's design, yet it carried its own divine signature. A six-tomer Rinnegan shimmered in his eye, proof of the godlike power flowing through him. And by this we can conclude that the claw marks, infused with the cells of Shibai, had become a bridge between the mortal and the divine. What I believe is that since Shibai or Suzuki would be connected with the chakra of the entire universe, and he could use his omnipotence anytime to change or reshape anything, I don't think the evolution of the Ten Tails into sentient creatures happened without his will. He must have been an anchor in bringing the Shinju to life, based on how his divine cells could be directly connected to him. In simple words, if Shibai didn't want them to appear, they wouldn't have emerged, which kinda mirrors the philosophical debate of free will versus predetermination. The idea that Shibai's cells were not randomly used, but were a part of a deliberate design to influence events in the shinobi world. The evolution of the Ten Tails into Jura, a sentient human god tree, was predetermined by Shibai's will to create a being that would test the resolve and agency of Boruto. But there is another narrative which plays a vital part here, which reduces the Shinju to nothing more than a stepping stone in the greater scene of the story. So since it was Shibai who decided the birth of the Shinju, there must be some higher purpose involved that I would talk in some other video. But when it comes to Boruto and Kawaki utilizing the Shibai cells to get rid of this powerful enemy, we stumble upon the chronicle of the creator versus the creation. Jura, even though he's really strong, was born from the Shinjutsu of an ascended Otsutsuki god. And when we talk about Boruto, he would be using the powers of the same god through a cosmic entanglement, making him somehow scale above this beast and beat him in the end. In other words, the divine intervention is the ultimate plot armor of Boruto that could make Jura realize that even though he's powerful, he cannot annihilate the destiny of a person, which was written by a god who's against him. This traces back to the time when he first emerged and declared that Boruto cannot escape his destiny. Even Kashin Koji had the same take, as he had used the power of prescience to confirm the end of Boruto. However, since we have the huge spoiler sequence, which is the flash forward, we know for a fact that Boruto does survive against Jura, and judging by how he's fighting Kawaki in the future, there is a good amount of chance that Jura will get handled in one way or another. So even though it isn't clear that how Jura came up with this escaping the destiny argument, what he's forgetting is that he himself is a part of a bigger picture, a path which was predetermined by the Otsutsuki god himself. And this makes one thing clear, that Boruto and Kawaki will require the powers of Shibai to defeat him. And judging by the Boro incident and Kawaki's will to transcend beyond all power limits, likely through the Shibai cells, it can be concluded that they both are going to take down Jura together with their newly unlocked divine powers. Just as I said earlier, we have seen him use the Kokugan, which was possessed by both Shibai and Ishiki. So if he is using the powers of the Otsutsuki god, then there is no way for us to tell otherwise, since Ishiki did not use any technique which doesn't stem from the Kokugan. And this was a deliberate attempt of the author to fool us all the time by selling the idea that Kawaki is using the powers of Ishiki, when in reality he is limited to the absorption of karma as well as the Kokugan of Shibai. So once Kawaki's true powers will be unlocked, there will definitely be one such new ability that will make him advantageous against Jura. As for Boruto, the Boro cells may or may not be responsible for his Jogan awakening, but he's definitely getting this power soon due to this foreshadowing from the anime. But talking about Kawaki's role against Jura first, even though he may be tapping into the techniques of an Otsutsuki god, we shouldn't forget that he still and will always remain the vessel of Ishiki Otsutsuki, the same Ishiki who exploited the Ten Tails as a chakra source for who knows how long. And it was clear from the reaction of the Jubi that he hated Ishiki, as he never reacted so violently in front of court. So the sole reason for me to believe that Kawaki is going to take a W against Jura is because he's likely the new big villain of the story, as shown in the flash forward sequence. Usually for someone to become the big bad, they need to defeat the current big boss. And going by this analogy, Kawaki would only rise up to the level of the main antagonist if he is able to somehow kill him, which kinda sounds plausible based on how he may be getting the strongest power-ups from Amado. Think of it this way: if the Shibai experiment requires the injection of a certain amount of cells into an individual to test the awakening of their Shinjutsu, what if Kawaki's Otsutsuki-fied body allows him to take on as many divine dosage as possible? While this will not necessarily grant him crazy powers like omnipotence, but it could somehow make his newly unlocked powers scale higher than everyone in the story. And as per what the majority of fandom believes, if Demon can actually beat Jura, then he should be a piece of cake for Kawaki too, after his new divine power-ups. Also, Kawaki destroying Jura would be symbolic to how Ishiki was always destined to take the chakra fruit that the Ten Tails was about to bear. The death of the Shinju would inevitably create the strongest Thorn Soul bulb to ever exist, and if Kawaki somehow consumes it, then it can be concluded that the whole destruction from the flash forward was actually done by him with a single click of his fingers. As for why it would matter to Boruto and how it has already been foreshadowed for him to take this huge menace down, well, Boruto might first need to make some changes to his morals and how he looks at Kawaki, whom he finds redeemable. We already saw him calling Jura a tree, something that Naoto would have never said, after realizing that cooperation could help him to handle the Shinju. But this cold approach would need to expand to Kawaki as well, cause once he becomes the strongest Otsutsuki in the universe, thanks to Amado's power-ups and the Thorn Soul, it won't be safe to keep him alive for long due to his twisted thinking, and he himself would prove that by trying to end the system that Boruto holds so close to his heart. This explains why he has been given the title of the Apostle of Destruction by Kishimoto. You may have heard me talking about the possibility of Jura being the destruction and Kawaki being the darkness that Toneri was talking about. But if Kawaki ends up killing Jura, then maybe the Jogan prophecy was always about the Apostle of Destruction, not only because of this title, but also due to the fact that Jura did not bring any destruction to the shinobi world, while Kawaki on the other hand not just destroyed it, but has also brought a state of complete darkness on everyone. The Jogan prophecy could be about the Apostle of Destruction rather than the incarnation of destruction. I will keep on expanding these theories in my future videos, so make sure to subscribe and check out these as well for more amazing stuff. I will see you next time.